Hey guys, in this video lesson we would understand what are inverse functions and how to find out inverse functions. Let's first understand a simple definition of inverse function. Inverse function is the inverse of a function in which the dependent and the independent variables are switched. Let's take this up with an example. If I have a function fx is equal to 2x minus 5, I know my fx is the dependent variable. And why is that so? Because the fx value depends upon the value of x. So my x is independent variable. Now in simple terms, we know dependent variable is y value and we know independent variable is x value. So if x and y get switched, it is called the inverse function. So in case of inverse functions, we either switch x and y. Switching of x and y means x becomes the dependent variable and y becomes the independent variable. Or the second way we can decide to find out the inverse function is by switching the operations. Operations in mathematics means addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. So whenever we are switching the operations, addition is going to be switched with subtraction and vice versa. Similarly, multiplication is going to be switched with division and vice versa. Although all of this seems very complicated, but we have very simple steps to follow in order to find out the inverse of a function. Let's go over the steps and understand the steps using example fx is equal to 2x minus 5. So our first step is replace fx with y. So we're going to do the first step here. We'll be replacing fx with y. Second step is interchange x and y. We'll do the second step here. This is how we interchange x and y. Third step is solve for y. Solving means isolating. So we'll be doing third step here. If I want to isolate this y, I'm going to move everything attached to y on the other side. So I'm going to move minus 5 first. It becomes x plus 5 equal to 2y. And then y is equal to x plus 5 divided by 2. Fourth step is rewrite the equation as inverse function. As we know, the original equation had fx. So the fourth step is going to be, I'm going to rewrite this y as f inverse of x. So I'm writing it as f inverse of x equal to x plus 5 divided by 2. And this is my final inverse equation. Now if you just notice that in the original function we had independent variable multiplied by 2 and then the product was subtracted with 5. And in the inverse function we have the independent variable added with 5 first and then divided by 2. So what it was being multiplied with, it is now being divided with that. What it was being subtracted with, it is now being added with that. And also we notice that the order of operations are switched. So it was first multiplied and subtracted. Here it is first added and divided. So in the original function, if we want to compare it, it was multiplied by 2. That was the step 1 when we have to solve this function, and then subtracted by 5. Whereas in the inverse function, not only the multiplication has been switched with division, but even the order of operations have also switched. So subtraction by 5 has been now converted to addition by 5, and this now does not go as a second step, this goes as the first step. So we'll do addition by 5 and then divided by 2. So step 1 is going to be inverted and becomes step 2, and step 2 gets inverted and becomes step 1. Let's quickly summarize this. If we're given a function fx is equal to 2x minus 5 and we have to find out the inverse of the function, then we have to first follow the first step, that is replace fx with y. Replacing fx with y would give us fx as y in the equation, and this becomes our first step. So we would get y equal to 2x minus 5. Second step is to interchange x and y. So we interchange x and y. Y place becomes x and x place becomes y. Third step is to solve for y. Then we isolate y. So leave y on one side and move everything attached to y on the other side. We get x plus 5 divided by 2. And we get the equation in terms of x for y. Then the fourth step is to rewrite the equation as inverse function. Because we started with fx, we would finish off with f of inverse x is equal to this thing that we got, x plus 5 by 2. Let's do another question for the sake of practice. If we have the equation as fx equal to x by 2 minus 1, our first step is to first rewrite fx as y. Second step is to interchange x and y. Third step is to isolate y. So we'll leave y on this side and move everything on the other side. This goes on the other side first. So we get x plus 1 and then 2 gets multiplied here. And then the fourth step is to rewrite the equation as inverse function. So y will be replaced with f inverse of x, and the equation will be 2 times x plus 1. And this is how we get the inverse functions. You would notice that here we found out the inverse function when the power of x was 1. Even in the previous example, we took power of x as 1. Now let's do a problem where x power is 2. So if we have fx equal to 3x squared minus 4, steps still stay the same. First step is replace fx with y. Second step is interchange x and y. Third step is to isolate y. So we would get x plus 4 divided by 3 is y square. And then y would be equal to square root of x plus 4 over 3. And then the fourth step is rewrite the function as inverse function. So we would have f inverse of x is equal to square root of x plus 4 divided by 3. This is how we follow the same steps to get the equation when it is in quadratic form into its inverse form. Let's do one last question for the sake of practice again. If we're given the equation as fx equal to 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. Now we know in order to convert this to the inverse function, our first step is to replace fx with y, and the second step is to interchange x and y. Third step is to then solve for y, but the problem here is that we have two places where we see a y, and this poses a problem for us to solve for y. So then what are we going to do is, before proceeding with step 1 or step 2, we will first convert this equation to vertex form. So always remember that your quadratic equation has to be in vertex form in order to be converted to its inverse function form, because the vertex form is a form in which we would see equation containing 1x instead of 2x's. Now, what are the steps to convert a standard form of equation to vertex form is we do completing the square. I'm not going to go over completing the square steps. For this, if you want to have a clarification, you can watch my video that contains completing the square steps, and that would be in the quadratic equations playlist of my channel. So here we're just going to quickly go over the steps. From the first two terms, I'm going to take out my a common. So I'll be left with x squared minus 3 by 2x plus 1. I'll be doing x squared minus 3 by 2x plus minus 3 by 4 square. I have this plus 1 outside. That's what I'm going to put down. I'm going to leave the 1 with the plus 3 by 4 square inside the bracket, and the 3 by 4 whole square with a minus sign will be taken outside the bracket and will be multiplied by this 2. Plus 1 comes down as is. From here I'm going to write on my answer, so I'm going to take in x 3 by 4 minus sign, whole square it, and I would get a minus 9 by 8. This I would get when I solve this, plus 1. To simplify this, I'm just going to put in common denominator. So I would multiply and divide 1 by 8. And finally, my equation is going to be x minus 3 by 4 square minus 1 by 8. So I have the equation that was given to me in standard form now in vertex form. Once I get my equation in the vertex form, I see I just have 1x now. Now I'm going to start following the steps of converting it to inverse function. My first step is replace fx with y. So I would get 2x minus 3 by 4 whole square minus 1 by 8. Second step is to interchange x and y. Third step is to solve for y, because I just have one spot where I see y, so it's easier for me to solve now. I'm going to isolate it, so I'm going to move this minus 1 by 8 on the other side first. I get x plus 1 by 8 equal to 2 times y minus 3 by 4 square. So this would look something like this. X plus 1 by 8 whole thing divided by 2, because this 2 is being multiplied, so it will go on the other side, get divided. Y minus 3 by 4 square. Let's do it here. So the square is the next thing that will go on the other side, becomes a square root. X plus 1 by 8 whole thing divided by 2 square root would give us y minus 3 by 4. And then finally I get y is equal to square root of x plus 1 by 8 divided by 2 plus 3 by 4. The fourth step is to rewrite the function as inverse function. So y is going to be replaced with f inverse of x, and we get square root of x plus 1 by 8 divided by 2 plus 3 by 4. So this is how we convert a quadratic equation that is given in standard form to inverse function. So we first change the quadratic equation to vertex form, and then we change the vertex form of equation to inverse form. To summarize this, if we have a quadratic equation in standard form, our first step is to change that quadratic equation into vertex form. And what do we use here for that is completing the square. Then we convert the quadratic equation in vertex form to inverse form, and we use the 4 steps of inverse functions for this.